you say, sometimes do you find that sometimes people need more of a solution-focused approach kind of thing, or in that sense?
Yeah,
But
and I
yet at the
think
same time, sorry, go on.
yeah, and I think I'm noticing that more and more, which begs that question, doesn't it? It's kind of like, well, is that they need it, or is that just what I'm noticing, and that's where I'm going? So I am directing the sessions.
Mm,
That's that constant argument, isn't it, about your philosophical position as a
yeah,
therapist?
yeah,
So, but I think that there are certain factors that influence whether or not that solution focused approach will come into my work. So
mhm,
when I do an initial session, if I use that as an example, I will listen really hard before I tell anybody how I work, because it might be that the modality that I think is the one that I'm hearing isn't necessarily the one that I want. So the first session is about gaining as much context as I can,
yeah,
so that then I can then offer to the client, this is how I'm thinking that the work might go.
okay,
Occasionally there are situations where there's a 50-50 chance. It's like, do you want to look backwards or do you want to look forwards?
mm,
And I'm picking up on that because of the use of language and the way that they sat in the chair and the way that they are talking about their goals or their past experiences. All of that is information that's given to me.
mhm,
And because it is informed consent, and I think because there is a lot of confusion about what therapy is, it's right and proper that I say, this is what I think I'm hearing. This is how I'm thinking of working with it. What do you think about that? It's the client's therapy, it's not mine. Um, so even though I might have influence on it, I seek that permission to go in the direction that the client wants.
yeah,
So some of my therapy is all looking back, and the future's kind of there, and we know
yeah,
that we'll get there and that the past will inform the future. And other people do want that. I want to know where I'm going. I haven't got a clue how to get there. This is the stuff that's in the way that we might need to do therapeutic work over, and that's when I'll have more of a solution focused approach.
yeah, yeah. So, uh, that's what a client approaching you is to expect on that first session, and it really is a kind of working with them to kind of figure that out, isn't it? In some ways, where
It's a
they're at
real
on.
alliance. So we talk about therapeutic alliance, don't we? And that first session is all about building an alliance. Um, and I offer that to the client. I tell the client that their only job in that first session is to work out whether they feel comfortable with me, and do I understand them enough that they think I can go with them. And
Yeah,
that's their only job, because if that relationship isn't there, again, very person-centered Carl Rogers, then at some point there's going to be an impasse where
yeah,
we're not going to get over this. The
mhm,
trust in the relationship is paramount.
yeah, yeah. So that being said, once that kind of and that is really, like you say, someone coming in and building that trust, because there are times where people, like I say, and there's no doubt, I think any therapist will say sometimes there's not a gelling, is there, some way or other?
No, and that's
And
okay, isn't it? So, and I
yeah,
think at that point, again, I suppose it depends on where you are and what you know and who you know as to whether or not you make a referral. But I think,
yeah,
again, that coming back to that congruence, learning to have the confidence to say, I don't think this is going to work between us,
yeah.
is a really big thing. Like
Mm,
both for the counsellor and the client, because neither one of us wants to reject or be rejected.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that I mean it's an important conversation, isn't it? Because I think especially the clients, people who've never experienced therapy at all,
Yeah,
sometimes think, "Oh, this is my counselor. I must," I mean, sometimes there is that bit where if there's not a gelling, you are allowed to, dare I say, it, shop around, and I think that's
yeah,
it's just part of the course. The fact that people would know that they have that choice, I think, is an important aspect of accessing therapy, isn't it? But like you say, you have that conversation with them because it is all about that rapport building and really
yeah.
understanding them in that first session.
Yeah, because I think,
Um,
there's a
mm,
wealth of information out there, isn't there? Like on the directories of, this is what therapy's like for me, this is what therapy's like for
yeah,
me. But even as a counsellor, I go on those and it starts to swim in front of my eyes and think, well, I can't really tell one from the other. So there's an element of potluck that first time that you go and
yeah,
see somebody. And I think what is perhaps not talked about very often is that you can do a couple of sessions with a therapist and think, this really isn't for me. So why put
Mm.
yourself through that torture? Go and
Yeah.
find the person that's right for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. And I think that's important, isn't it, for both, because it is relationship at the end of the day, and there's got to be both a meeting of purpose in that sense.
Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, just a quick word about. Sorry to throw this one in, because
It's
it's
all right.
obviously the kind of things that you would work with, kind of typical kind of problems or difficulties people might have. Where does it sort of range from? What does it look like? In
So
that sense?
for me, I do seem to have a pattern of clients that find me. So um, I started off after I'd qualified, recognizing that the work I'd done in the placements and in my training had been largely anxiety, depression, and loss.
Mhm.
Um, those were the core elements that were coming through. And then because of my experience as an executive coach and a learning development officer, there was issues of like self-esteem and like personal effectiveness and relationship issues, like difficulties at work, bullying, etc. So they came through. At the same time as that, I went to work with children and young people in schools, and that really increased the breadth of what I work with. So now I still work with children and young people, but 14 and above I work with now in
Yeah.
practice. Occasionally younger, but mostly that. But the issues that are presenting to me now, because there's a saying in therapy, I'll just put it forward first of all, that you get the clients, they'll find you. The clients that you need find you. And even though we don't necessarily go out creating a pattern of clients, somehow we find a niche. And I've seen that happen with some peers as well. And I think it's really interesting about kind of like what niche do we end up in. So
Mm.
a lot of my niche is around relationship challenges and relational trauma. Um, Neurodivergence is finding me, but I think that's again part of that pattern of communication and the similarities and the
Mhm.
openness and the literality that comes with the training from being a counsellor, partly, but also because I'm also neurodivergent. So it's almost like you're in a club. So but again,
Would
it's
you
not
like
going
to
to work
say a
for
little bit more?
everybody.
Yeah, I was going to say, would you like to say something on that, or some
um
neurodivergence? So,
I think where we're at the moment, especially around adults, because there's a curiosity, isn't there, at the moment about I think I might be neurodivergent, and people not really knowing where to go with that. And having gone through the process of questioning it, exploring it, going for a diagnosis about something, working out what that means for me, there is an element of insider knowledge that I have that is helpful but not essential, I
mm,
believe. So,
mm,
even before I was diagnosed and while I was working in the schools, it was the person-centered practice that enabled me to work well with neurodivergent clients. I didn't have everything. I knew I had gaps. So, but meeting the person first, finding out about the person, understanding what it is that's easy or difficult about their world, felt very person-centered to me. And then
mm.
using that information about relationship and how are we in relationship to then develop on that, wherever that ended up taking us.
Hi guys, if you like that clip, you can check out the full length podcast in the link below. Just click the more button. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. And if there are people who you know who might be interested in this therapy, make sure you share it. It really might help them. If you look down below, you'll be able to find links to my website, my book sale, and other useful info related to this video. See you next time.